it was shocking how bad the gyms have gotten in the Bay. Like, if you're doing every competition, like you're kind of just getting worse throughout the season. I'm not just a professional climber. Like, I don't do well in a competition or whatever. It's like not the end of the world. Wasn't very good at running. That's the only time I've ever actually thrown up from training.
Welcome to the season 3 premiere of the That's Not Real Climbing podcast. I'm your host, Jenny, and I'm excited to introduce my guest, Ross Fulkerson. Ross is a boulder and lead climber on Team USA, and you may be familiar with his YouTube channel where he documents his climbing adventures and shares coaching tips. In this episode, we'll learn about his bikepacking adventure that he skipped the first half of the 2024 World Cup season for, hear about his struggle trying to balance competitions with his desire to travel and all his other hobbies, the importance of mindset and meditation, and if you're a USA Bay Area gym climber, maybe close your ears when he starts trashing the Bay Area gym scene. This episode is full of training and mindset tips, so I hope you learn a lot and enjoy this episode with Ross. I got back from Colorado. Well, I left right after qualifications because I knew I wasn't going to make semis, and I didn't want to spend the extra money, and I also figured maybe I would be like sad from how bad it went, so I didn't want to extend my trip. It ended up well, actually, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Nice. Next time you gotta have the confidence to book the Airbnb for the extra night or two.
Well, I mean, I'm still pretty far from semis, but I was mostly worried that I just like wouldn't be able to establish on any of them, or my goal was to like get a zone, and I ended up getting 3 tops in a zone, so very happy with that. It went well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like the level is always a lot more attainable than you think. Even like World Cups and stuff like that, like aren't that hard if you like, at least not all of them, you know. But it's just the like execution piece that becomes really tricky because you like build it up to be like this super big ordeal to like climb, but they're just moves, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what to expect going into it, so I didn't know what the level would be. But I think I think you know like Enrico, right?
Yeah, he was one of like the first really good coaches I worked with. I grew up coming to San Diego and working with him, along with my coach Al. They used to both like kind of run the training center at Mesa Rim.
Yeah, so they're also like doing like the adult team here, and so he was like helping me through some stuff, and he mentioned that like some of the grades of the boulders there might be like V4, V5-ish. And I guess that was pretty accurate. Like I didn't feel like I needed to use more strength than that, but it was just like kind of finicky and precise.
Yeah, they punish you if you like don't do them well, but if you do them well, it's not too bad.
Are you back in San Diego?
Yeah, I just got back. I was in San Francisco for a week, seeing my family and climbing around with some old friends there. And it was shocking how bad the gyms have gotten in the Bay. Like,
whoa, wait, I need to hear about this.
Pretty much like Touchstones are like the worst gyms I've ever climbed at now. Like Dogpatch used to be like such a sick gym, and we would climb there like once a month growing up. But now like everything is so greasy, and the setting is pretty suboptimal. And yeah, I was just shocked by like how bad it had gotten, because they used to be like some of the best gyms in the nation, I think, at least when I was climbing there. And yeah, overall the level in the Bay Area is pretty low, apart from like Benchmarks, Mosaic, and obviously the Boulder Field, but that's not really the Bay. But it was interesting. I felt like I had to learn how to climb a completely different way, because the holds are so greasy, and at Touchstone they like acid wash their holds, or at least they used to. So they like, instead of power washing them, they like get rid of the chalk in like this that, I think. This is how it's been explained to me, so apologies if this is no longer accurate. But it like takes away all the texture, and they just have so many people climbing on those holds that they just get so nasty so quickly. So they were like, yeah, I had to like completely think about like how to engage on holds, because it's almost like gets more slippery like the harder you squeeze. So I just did a bunch of volume on like easier things where I could still climb efficiently and not like feel like I was actively getting worse at climbing. But anyways, I feel very grateful to be back here in San Diego and back at the grotto, and like I was at North City this morning and the Wall this morning as well.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And
yeah,
both. I did like kind of warm up and then did some hard boulders with the Class 5 team. And then went to North City and did some speed sport laps on like a couple really cool like 13s there.
I wonder what the Bay Area listeners are going to think about you trashing their gyms.
I mean, I'm from the Bay Area. I feel like that they were really good, and like the Bay Area was the strongest, at least youth wise, like in the nation for a little while. Like when I was competing, like my category, like 8 out of the 10 finalists at nationals were from the Bay Area. And that was like true for a lot of categories. And then everyone kind of moved away, and I guess, yeah, it just feels like it got very, very corporate, where gyms don't really care about like setting well, or like as long as they're making money, you know, they're like, okay, like on to the next gym. Like, let's just do more and more and more instead of training setters. And a lot of that's like not even the setter's fault, right? Because they're just given really shitty holds, really bad holds. And like no one's teaching them how to set. Like there need to be like clinics, and actually that's something I would love to do at one point. It's like, at least my coach Hal is thinking about doing like setting clinics and stuff like that. But yeah, overall I think San Diego is a much more critical approach to climbing, and like trying to actually understand why a move is hard or easy, or like from a setting perspective set to actually teach something. And that was a big thing we try and do with our clinics, like the one that you took, like making a move actually force the climber to climb it well, and not allowing a move to let someone like take advantage of it because they're strong or whatever that is, you know?
Yeah, I was really happy with that clinic because it happened like right before the comp, and I felt like leading up to it, I had kind of lost confidence in like more comp style stuff. I don't know why, I just like hadn't gotten on much. So I kind of like needed that refresher to build up the confidence going into it. Because I feel like also it's like partially mental, just like how confident you feel on those types of moves. So it's really helpful.
Yeah, I think confidence in climbing in general, and especially in comp climbing, is so important, and doesn't really matter what your like hardest capability is. It just matters like how confident you can be in like a 4 or 5 minute round on the moves in front of you. So that level is not always going to be like pushing like ideally your level is at the point where you're not having to learn the movements of the climbs that are in the comp, and you can execute those like at a subconscious level. We actually talked about this a bunch at practice today, like the difference between practicing and learning moves versus performing is very different, and it takes being very intentional about which one you're doing to like actually make the most of it. Because like today I was trying this campus sequence, and very much in like the learning moves side of things, and I had a video, and like my coach and my buddy Marco were both watching, and they'd give me feedback, and I tried it like 30 times, you know, and just getting like repetition, getting data. And then I'd kind of try it again, I'd like visualize, okay, what am I trying to focus on now? Try that once or twice, see if it like makes a difference. And then once you put all these pieces together, right, you're chunking them down to manageable adjustments, and then you put the whole thing together. And at that point, everything should just be flowing kind of subconsciously. So I got it at the end. Actually, no, I didn't do it, but I felt the movement, like the flow, like the generation of it all.
Yeah, you could visualize yourself do it.
Yeah, exactly. Next practice, I'll go back to it and not be in like that super, like thinking state of mind, and just try and execute it kind of at a subconscious level. And then it's like added to your movement library. I don't know if we talked about that in the clinic, but that's kind of a fun way to think about moves. It's like you learn it and then it's like added to your movement library. And then anytime you see it in a comp or gym or whatever, you're like, okay, this is like the formula for this move. Like if it's a lâché, right? Like extending and generating, making time over the feet. And your body just knows how to do those moves. And that's when it becomes really easy to like execute it in a comp and feel confident enough to like just throw yourself at it.
And that like learning process is huge for it, because it just sometimes it takes a long time to figure out, but then hopefully once you get it, you get it.
Yeah, once it clicks, like that's such a rewarding feeling. And I need to do a better job at like seeking out more of those learning experiences, because sometimes you try a move and you're like, oh, that's impossible, and it takes like an hour or two, and like seeing your friends try it and do it and like really working through it. And then once you do it, you're like, okay, this is easy. Why was I struggling on this?
Yeah, and we'll get into the mindset stuff later. But before we even get into like anything, I know people have already been wondering why you weren't at the first few World Cups of the year. So what were you up to?
Yeah, this was an interesting year. From the get-go, I was more psyched on competing in ropes, just because there's a lot of outdoor projects I want to pursue that are more rope-oriented or deep water solo stuff. And then I qualified for the Bouldering World Cup, which was kind of a bonus, and was planning to do Salt Lake, but then this really cool bikepacking trip / climbing trip came up, and it was a pretty unique opportunity and something completely outside of my comfort zone. So I kind of figured I could do Salt Lake next year. Because I'd been focused on ropes, I didn't feel like I was going to be able to show up to Salt Lake and like truly do my best, like perform to the best of my abilities. And I feel fortunate to be in a position where like I've made finals at that comp. So it's like, well, if I'm not going to show up in that same shape or better, like what's the point? Or like not what's the point, but there's less to learn if I'm not like fully committing myself. And it feels like it just didn't feel right in my gut to like show up with only a couple weeks of like proper World Cup bouldering training. So I did this bikepacking trip instead, where we biked from South Lake Tahoe all the way to Lone Pine, actually Alabama Hills. And that took like 6 days. It was like 400 miles, and I hadn't really done any road biking and stuff before that. But it was so beautiful just camping under the stars and jumping in the river in the morning. And we were going at a pretty mellow pace. And a couple of the guys were really experienced who'd done it before. So we like camped at these cool hot springs and explored all of these amazing zones along the way. And then right after the trip, we actually took one day, we drove from Mammoth all the way to LA, got to LA at like 5:30, then went to the American Alpine Club gala dinner, did that till like 12:30, and then took an Uber from there back to Santa Barbara, got my car there because I had carpooled out to South Lake with a buddy, then slept for like 3 hours in my car, and then drove all the way back to Bishop that morning at 6 to meet up with the whole crew, and then finish the last day of biking. So I missed like a 20-mile section going downhill from Mammoth to Bishop. But then I joined them for the last, I think it was like 45-mile day from Bishop to Alabama Hills.
Sounds intense.
And then the next day we woke up, early, drove all the way back to Bridgeport, and then hiked into the Hulk, which is this epic, huge wall, like pristine granite. Um, but it was very much early season. Like we were the first party to do it, I think. So we like camped near the base, like 3 miles from the base, and then woke up at 4, put crampons on, and like hiked all the way into the base of the wall. Uh, and normally people climb it like starting now, but we were like out there and wanted to kind of incorporate it into this whole bike and climbing trip. Um, so we went with this Chilean guy who has like climbed all over Patagonia and then had a photographer, and she was like super experienced with like big wall alpine stuff as well. So it felt like a proper adventure. We climbed that and then wrapped down in the dark and then hiked slash like slid down the ice all the way back to camp, and then like got lost and had to cross a river and then walk through a swamp and got back to the campsite at like 11. And then I drove back to San Diego the next day and got into sport training mode.
Jeez, that is intense.
So anyways, that's long story short. That's why I wasn't at the Salt Lake World Cup.
Wow. That's really intense. It sounds like a lot of little sleep and a lot of exhaustion. Did you enjoy it overall?
Yeah, no, it was so fun. I felt like the whole part was like definitely a mission, but the bikepacking trip, like by the end of it, you feel like you could just go forever. Because we were, again, like we were doing like 40 miles a day, so like nothing crazy. And we had a group of like 6 people, so you get to like chat with everyone as you're biking, and the scenery is amazing just going down 395. And then we took a bunch of like side roads too that were like obviously way quieter than the highway and safer and really scenic. And then yeah, it's a fun routine. Like you wake up, go jump in the river, stretch a bit, make some coffee, then ride for 2 hours, stop for lunch or make lunch, and then ride for another couple hours at night, set up camp, make a campfire, play some music under the stars. Everyone was like a musician or just had like fun stories to tell. And I only had known one of the guys beforehand, so it was kind of fun to meet this whole new crew of people. I think eventually we'll have a video that kind of showcases that whole trip. It was a fundraiser for the Nick Wood Foundation. And the lead climbing on the Hulk was like amazing. It was one of, I think I had done like 6 or 7 trad leads before that. And then I led like all the hardest pitches on positive vibration, which are not that hard, but they felt hard for me because I was just very much still learning that whole process. Or not even, like I was placing gear well, but it was kind of fun to bring like that competition, like performance mindset to like trad climbing on a big wall where you're like exposed, and there was like actually 60-mile-an-hour winds for the entire day. Again, yeah, very much the wrong time of year to do that. But it kind of added to the experience. And like placing gear, I was like so bricked on this one like 511C pitch at the top, and like their rope drag was insane because I had not put slings on like the right cams. And then you're just like pumped out of your mind, like having to use both hands to like, well, I like got to the anchor, like run out with like a 0.0 and a 0.1, like 10 or 15 feet below. And then you do like this big move to this like ledge and mantle a ledge, and the wind is like pushing you off a little bit. And I had to have like both hands to like pick the rope up to like pull it up and clip the anchor. But that was one of my maybe like most favorite climbing experiences I've ever had, because it's just so different. And you feel like you're learning so much, and also like incorporating so many things that you would use in other situations. Like I was doing the same like breathing techniques and like visualization and mindset stuff that I would do before a bouldering World Cup. And it, yeah, just allows you to perform at a higher level, 11C level.
Well, I mean, with the added danger element, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, that I can't really relate to that because I kind of stopped climbing outside generally, like during like after COVID. I got kind of sick of it, and that's when I got into the comp space. So I think that climbing is a little bit too real for me. This is the Not Real Climbing podcast.
Not real
so
climbing.
we're gonna bring it back into the not real climbing portions.
Yeah,
But it's really cool
let's
how
do
you
it.
can relate that to like the kind of mindset stuff that you have to do for comps as well. Um, and yeah,
Totally.
it sounds like a lot of fun, just not an experience that I would ever want to do. It sounds way too intense.
Yeah, it was pretty long day.
But I think understandable why you skipped the Salt Lake comp for that. Um, I guess when it comes to choosing which World Cups you go to, how do you sort of decide? Because I guess with like the prize money not being like that much, how like what makes it worth it for you to go to a World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think it was kind of only this year that I asked myself that. And it was a lot harder to answer it after having some of these like big adventurous outdoor experiences where I was feeling that same amount of like connectedness and using those same techniques. But it was like on my own schedule and where I felt like be more present for like a longer period of time. Um, so for comps, I mean, growing up, just was like, it seemed like an amazing way to like go travel and experience this side of climbing that I hadn't kind of been exposed to yet. And like traveling on the circuit was really, really cool in that way, and a really fun place to meet new people and like travel to all these countries. But it was definitely a hard balance to be like, why, like, if you're doing every competition, like you're kind of just getting worse throughout the season. Like traveling like that much is so taxing, and um, it becomes hard to like justify in some ways. So like this year, my intention was like, okay, I want to do a couple comps because I really love competing, and I like trying to challenge myself and test myself in these like very high pressure situations. And I think that's when you're able to learn the most about yourself, but also like all of these movement frameworks and like mindset techniques and things that I'm trying to help develop and ultimately coach more of in the future. Um, so like that was why I didn't do Salt Lake. It's like, okay, I don't want to go to a World Cup unless I'm gonna show up like fully prepared. And like that's definitely a very privileged situation to be in because I've like done these comps before and I know what it feels like to show up and having not been prepared. And it just kind of feels like, I don't know, a bit icky where you're like, oh, I'm here, but like I'm not able to like show or like prove to myself like that I'm capable of like getting to finals or whatever it is, because I know I am, but like I didn't put in the work to get there. So I definitely this year I'm trying to do less, but just do it better. And it's hard for me to say no to some of these opportunities, like the adventure and the actual comp climbing and all these different, even like if there's good waves in San Diego and I'm supposed to be training, I'm like, oh, I want to like take advantage of the surfing and then also go climb. And like, if you're just really practical about it, you're like, okay, well, that's actually going to like make you worse at climbing. So I think it's always like a little bit of a trade-off. And it's important to like live your life and like do what really brings you joy. But yeah, asking that question to yourself is huge. And if it's anything but like it's because I really want to, and there's 100 reasons why like you could really want to do a comp, but it's dangerous when it's like, oh, it's because like I should, or like XY, like these people think I should, or like because I could do well. But if you don't believe in like your own ability to like do really well and like, or believe in yourself to like learn and like make the most of the experience, then maybe it isn't worth doing it, you know?
Please excuse this brief intermission, but I've gotten a few requests for this, so I just wanted to announce that if you're interested in helping support the show, my Patreon page is now live. Some perks include ad-free, interruption-free episodes, deleted scenes, prioritized guest questions, or the ability to submit video questions, an enamel pin shipped to you after 2 months of membership, and much more to come. The proceeds go back into the podcast to help me break even, and they help improve the experience of the guests. If you'd like to support the podcast non-monetarily, liking, commenting, and sharing helps a great deal as well. Back to the show. Yeah, it's usually like one of my first questions, but for those who like don't know your story, how did you start out with climbing and get into the comp scene?
Yeah, so I guess I really started climbing on the redwood trees in our front yard. So I grew up near Palo Alto in the Bay Area, and we had like this 80-foot tall redwood tree in our front yard. And my dad and I built a tree house like 50 feet up in it. And I guess when I was like really young, we had a couple like ladders going up to like lofts in our house, and I would like climb around on those, or so I'm told. And then once my dad kind of taught me the rules of climbing the big trees, he's like, all right, always have like 3 points of contact and like be safe. But that was like, it was just a big ladder. It's like the most climbing friendly tree I've ever been in. So you could like run around, and I have a clip on my Instagram, like from 5 years ago or something, of me like speed climbing the tree, and you can like just monkey, like actually speed climb it. It was like 10 seconds to go up like 45 feet or something. So, and then I think I had my own birthday party at the gym when I was 7. Yeah, just because my mom was like, oh, like this would be a fun thing to have a birthday party at. And then the next year I did the same thing. And then I did some summer camps after that when I was like 9. And then I think I joined the team after that when I was like 10, or maybe like in between 9 and 10. That was at Planet Granite, Sunnyvale, which is a really cool gym. Like I went back there this last week actually, and the lead walls are like so intimidating. There's this one feature called the double wave, which is, it still feels like one of the most like proud gym features. Cause it's just like super overhung and like has these like double wave features, hence the name, where if you like fall at the wrong spot, you kind of just like smack into this lip. So yeah, growing up, I trained a lot there, and was fortunate to have a really cool coach, Isaac Williams, who always brought the team outside. So we go to Bishop for like Christmas and Thanksgiving, and climbed a lot out there, and a little bit in Yosemite and Tahoe, and had an amazing group of friends and teammates there that really shaped kind of the climbing community that I was part of. And we had a couple older guys on the team that we like, myself and a couple of the younger kids like really looked up to. And when I started on the team, they were like climbing B10 sort of thing. And that just like provided this benchmark of like, okay, like I want to train with them, and I want to like go project and like climb on the same things that they're doing. And yeah, so I did a bunch of youth comps. Like I guess the first actual comp I did was like second year D. So wasn't like some of the other youth, or I feel like some of the kids like Brooke and I don't know, a lot of the other like phenomenal climbers of our generation started climbing when they were like, they had like 4 years in D, you know, in youth D. But I only had 1 year in youth D.
What age does that start for people who aren't familiar?
I think you can be any age up to like 10 or 12, maybe like 11 or 12.
Still really young.
12.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite young. Maybe it's older, like 11 or 12. And then there's like C, D, or yeah, D, C, B, A, and then junior. And I did better at ropes at the very beginning. I won like nationals in like youth C, like after 3 years or something of competing.
Nice.
And then like made a couple like bouldering finals, but never did super well in the finals. I kind of just did the whole like youth circuit every year I could. Apart from 1 year where I accidentally sanded off a part of my fingernail.
Whoa, I never noticed that.
So when I was like, 12 or no, maybe it was like 14. My dad and I were like making a campus board to hang at our house because we built like a little climbing wall as well. And it got caught in the belt sander I was using.
That's awful.
Like where the belt kind of goes back into the machine, and it like sanded it down to the bone. And then like it just rearranged like the skin cells. So, or like the nail cells. So it grew back all wonky. But otherwise, it didn't really affect the climbing once it's healed. But for a while I climbed like with a lobster claw, just like front two and my thumb.
That's hard. And I mean, now you still can't do the whole like fingernails behind the volumes thing.
Yeah, I can't cheat like that anymore. So I'm just a purist. Don't grip behind the volumes.
Yeah.
But yeah, apparently it didn't give me Tommy Caldwell level finger injury power. But I mean that would have been hard to climb like only front two.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that would be crazy. Anyways, then I was always climbing outside like here and there, but never really like going on like long trips. It'd always just be like a week or something of kind of climbing in a new zone and exploring around. And then started going to San Diego when I was maybe like 16 or 17.
Oh, okay.
For these Mesa Rim used to host these like national training camps, where they'd fly in like coaches from around the world and have a super legit team of setters, including Enrico and Al and a couple other setters that are like some of the best in the nation, if not the world. So I felt super fortunate to be able to like learn at those camps, and like some of the best kids and adult climbers in the nation at that time were like doing those camps. So like I would not be anywhere close to the best, but like then you're learning from like some of the best people in the nation, which is really cool. And that definitely kind of accelerated my growth. But it was hard to like climb on that in San Diego, like this comp style, and then go back to the Bay and not have like really any comp style setting. So we were always just making up our own moves. And I think that helped a lot with like understanding like visualization and having to like understand setting, because like we didn't have good climbs to just go like hop on. It was much more like, okay, like let's try and make up moves on the wall that like force us to actually climb in like a more dynamic and like positional sort of way. And then when the boulder field opened up, we would go up there, and that's in Sacramento, so it's not super far, like 2.5 hours, but we go up there like once a month and just have the most mega sessions. And that was with Tim King and Danny Seo and Sam McQueen and Sullivan Bartz and like a bunch of the kids that were on the Stanford climbing team. So we'd go up there and like literally climb for like 4 hours, get lunch, and then climb for like another 4 hours and just try and do like every climb in the gym. And those are always like some of my favorite sessions. Yeah, it was pretty cool that like Tim and I would at the end of those sessions try and go repeat like or do every like purple tape in the gym, which is like the second hardest grade. And I feel like we learned a lot about like how far you could push yourself by like competing and trying to do a ton of these hard climbs and like a lot of volume after like 7 hours of climbing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Which I don't necessarily recommend doing, but every now and then I think it's worth pushing yourself kind of beyond what you're comfortable with, and you can realize that you actually have a lot more to give.
Yeah, kind of like proving to yourself that you're able to.
And it forces you to climb them like really efficiently because you don't have like the power and the strength that you did in hour one of the session or hour two. Um, so yeah, that, I guess thinking about it now, like that was maybe the start of like me understanding the value of like repeating climbs and like being more analytical and like actually forcing yourself, I guess, indirectly in that sense to climb them efficiently.
And you were also part of like the class 5 youth team for a while, right?
Yeah, I guess I was never really on like the youth team, but once I started, so I went to UCLA for 2 years, but only 2 quarters of that was in person, and then COVID hit.
Oh.
So for those 2 quarters, I drove to San Diego every single weekend, and I put all my classes just Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I'd like Thursday night or afternoon, I'd drive to San Diego and stay with my buddy Marco for 4 days, and just climb as much as I could during those 4 days because LA had no good climbing gyms at the time. And now it really only has like one good climbing gym, Long Beach Rising.
Oh, really?
But everything else is Touchstone and Movement. So sorry, Touchstone and Movement, but Dang. You guys got to step it up. So anyways, yeah, I was driving to San Diego every single weekend. And actually like taking the bus for a portion of that because I didn't have a car. And then I started just like illegally parking my car on campus, and that worked out phenomenally.
Nice.
I got like one ticket for like the whole like 5 months I was there.
Lucky you.
I know. And I was like parked it right next to my dorm, which was epic, and then could go just like camp at the beach if I wanted to because it was like a little camper van setup, and then come to class in the morning, and that was fun, but not the most sustainable routine of like 4 days of climbing and then like 3 days of just grinding school. So ultimately that I transferred to University of Utah after doing the rest of that year online at UCLA and then another full year online. So I could be like at the US Training Center out in Salt Lake, and then was always kind of going back and forth between Salt Lake and San Diego because my coach Al, who's also the head of Class 5 climbing, was out here, and I felt like was one of the only people like really being analytical about climbing and like trying to develop new ways of thinking, both like with vocabulary, but also just like reframing the way you think about movement and really like elevating the sport. So that was like huge for me to be able to chat with him and like go to their team practices. So yeah, then around that time I started like wearing Class 5 shirts, like competing, and that felt like
I see
home. And then I'd go back to Salt Lake and like climb all the boulders there, and it felt like I'd learned to climb really well in San Diego, and then I'd go to Salt Lake and have like an amazing facility like with the US Training Center to like practice all those climbs and like actually perform. But it was for me less of a like area or like place of growth and more like performance oriented. And I felt like I needed a bit more of a balance. But in terms of like volume of like good climbs, I think Salt Lake is still the best in the nation.
I mean, yeah, that makes sense. It's only fair.
Yeah.
Through like your youth climbing team experience, like growing up or anytime you've like worked with Class 5, what do you feel like, or do you feel like there was anything unique about those programs that makes like specifically successful athletes for comps, or did they like teach you things that prepared you well for World Cups?
Yeah, totally. A ton of it is just the environment you're in. So like having really good setters with the space in the facility to like set applicable climbs with like a good hold selection is huge. And to be honest, there just aren't a lot of like setters that are able to do that. So yeah, Alan and Rico being some of like the best setters out there are able to like set these climbs that force you as an athlete to like climb them well. And this was another thing we're talking about today at practice is like, he was saying like, okay, like my job is to set this climb and then just barely guide you, give you kind of clues on like how to climb it well. And then you try it a bunch of times and then come to that like conclusion on your own where you like understand why it's actually the most efficient or like the easiest to do it in a certain way. And then you like actually learn the move and you can like confidently add it to that movement library I was talking about. So that was like huge to just have exposure to that. And then also like just making up creative ways to like get a lot of volume with certain types of movement and like be confident, just like standing on volumes, literally like having a volume station where all you do is like no hands slap. Like that was the first time I had ever seen that was down in San Diego. And, or like spray wall, like movement stations where they set a whole wall that's just like skate dynos. And for the training camp, like you spend an hour just like doing those skate dynos. So yeah, they were very ahead of the times in terms of implementing like unique ways to like learn and teach movement, and all of their coaching is based on like a movement philosophy rather than like a strength philosophy. It's like you don't have to be super strong to do any of these. It's all like positional, and like as a setter, our goal is to like make you problem solve in this correct way that will like allow you to like unlock this puzzle instead of like you're just gonna like overpower and like squeeze this puzzle to death, you know? And I'm still learning that today. Like that was a big thing I was actually practicing today at practice, was like not pulling too hard on these holds for this campus sequence because it was throwing off my whole like the arcs of my generation were yeah, I don't want to get too technical, but like they were no longer as efficient as they could be because I was like engaging on this hold and like really learning to detach like your attachment points and like how hard you have to squeeze a hold from like how hard you engage the rest of your body. So just because you can grab a crimp and like own it and like do a one arm pull up doesn't mean that you need to engage like your whole forearm and shoulder and back the second you grab it. It's actually better to just hold that hold as hard as you need to, just to like hang on it and then like swing around it, kind of like a monkey. Or like if you're doing monkey bars, right? It's way easier to swing between bars if you're like smoothly flowing and your arm is straight, rather than if you like lock off and you have to like hold that lock off as you swing to the next bar. Now you're using like way more strength to do the same movement. So yeah, just being exposed to those sort of concepts at those Mesa Rim training camps, and then with Al at Class 5 now was huge.
Yeah, and then it produces a lot of great world-class athletes, so I think there must be something to it.
Definitely. And I guess I mentioned the environment, so part of that is like the coaching and setting, but another part of that is like the people you're with. And when you're around a whole other group of people that are approaching climbing with that same mindset, it's super powerful because like right now Class 5 has a open team as well. So I'm on that with my buddy Marco and a couple of the older kids from the youth team, but also a handful of just psyched adults and like setters in San Diego. And there's a pretty wide range of like climbing abilities, but we're all like learning the same concepts and like looking at improving kind of with that same like analytical approach, at least when you're practicing. So it's really fun just to like chat with everyone and be in this like really high energy, kind of rich learning environment. So if you're in San Diego and want to join an adult team, Class 5 is pretty solid. Grotto also has an adult team that's very legit.
Yeah, it's all very popular nowadays.
That my good friend Marco coaches.
Oh, cool. I didn't know he coached it. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of your competition experience, Do you have like a favorite IFSC comp that you went to?
Yeah, I mean they're all pretty cool. My first like youth worlds was in Guangzhou, China, and that was a pretty cool experience. Like just first time being in Asia and first time like competing at like an international event like that. Um, but in terms of just like overall psych or like energy, I think like the Chamonix World Cup is pretty epic. Like being able to be on the route and then look to your right and see the glacier coming down and having like thousands and thousands of people behind you.
What happened at Youth Worlds in Guangzhou?
I mean, there wasn't any like particular like moment that was like crazy, but just that whole like environment of seeing all these other kids from around the nation and like meeting all these people and uh just like realizing that rock climbing was like actually this much bigger sport slash like career than I had like otherwise imagined um was pretty cool. Because I feel like I went there with my family and we spent like a week and a half ish in like Hong Kong before and then went to Guangzhou and it was less of like a performance like all right, you're here to like win this competition. It was more of like a travel experience and like climbing thing. But then after that, you're like seeing kids that are like showing up and taking it like so seriously. And um, I guess that was a kind of an interesting realization for me. And I guess something I'd still kind of like struggle with is like understanding the line between like putting 100% of your effort into one thing and also like making the most of the experiences that come with like competing in other countries and stuff like that. Because like the World Cup circuit, like you're in these amazing places, but if you truly want to like do your best, like objectively, like you should get there beforehand and like just rest for like a bunch of days and not like go explore around. Which was always like really hard for me. So I felt like me and a couple other people on the circuit would try and take advantage of those places a bit more than other people. And maybe that hurt some of my performance, but I think I enjoyed the experience more overall, maybe. I don't know. That's very like specific to like each person. But like in Italy last year, like in Brixton, that was actually one of the cooler bouldering World Cups. I went out like the day before or like 2 days before and like did like a super chill like mile hike to go like check out these amazing rock formations in the Dolomites and like that sort of thing always seems like almost like better for me performance wise because you're able to like connect with nature and just like kind of slow down and be more present and then bring that same kind of attitude into the competition. Whereas if you're like 1000% focused and you're just in your hotel room all day and you're like, this comp is like everything in the world, then it kind of amplifies maybe any mistakes you make and almost becomes like this negative feedback loop.
Right.
Whereas if you take the kind of like the growth mindset approach, like I'm like here to learn and like I obviously want to do my best and like I was like taking it quite seriously, but I think more so than other people, I was also wanting to go explore around a little bit.
Yeah, I can definitely see how that would be like a hard choice to make. I feel like before Vail, I kind of just sat around, but then all I could do was just sit there and think about like how nervous I am or like I don't know what else to do. I'm just kind of like stuck here in this like idle state where it's like, well, I'm not really taking advantage of anything. And now I'm kind of just here and I feel like I'm kind of wasting a trip. But yeah, it's nice that you
Yeah,
get to go out and
it's a weird
experience
feeling.
it.
Yeah, and I think I would encourage anyone like listening to this that's competing and maybe they've experienced that same like idle, like restlessness state, just to go like take a walk outside. Like that's not gonna hinder your performance at all. Like a couple miles or just like walking around, and just go like meditate in the forest or something.
And I guess, so that kind of makes me wonder, so your like best result was in Salt Lake. Do you feel like maybe since you didn't feel that need to like explore, you kind of had
Totally.
that hometown advantage and you were able to perform better there?
Yeah, totally. Um, yeah, 100%. Like for 2 weeks before, I had like a very consistent routine of like waking up, doing like 10 minutes of meditation out on the deck, then like reading a book about like mindsets uh, and then every like other day I'd go like jump in the like cold plunge and try and like practice my like breathing techniques to like slow down my heart rate. And it was a very, yeah, focused routine. And all of my climbing during that period was just at the gyms around Salt Lake where uh, it was all like performance oriented. So for 2 weeks beforehand, I would go do like a full off the wall warm up and then just climb like V10s or below. Like I would basically try and do like every V like 6 or 7 to like V11 in the gym. Or at least all the like compy style ones that were like more movement oriented, and just repeat each one like 2 or 3 times until I felt super confident in like the method I was doing it. And then like you have this massive like library of movement and this huge volume of climbing that you've done really, really close to like the limit of how well you can climb, you know? And then like you do the competition and you don't expect to climb any different than you already have been climbing. Like I feel like people maybe go to the gym and climb just like so, or then they like go to a competition and like expect to like climb great or like expect to climb different than like how they normally climb. And for me, before competitions, it's really important to like increase the average of like your best climbing. Like if you think about like in a competition, there's all these like distracting variables in a competition. So it's harder to climb like at your best, you know? So before the competition, you want to be like maximizing the amount of like really efficient, good climbing you're doing. And I think one of the best ways to do that is like repeating climbs and having like a long off the wall warm up. So like the second you pull on the wall, you're just climbing super efficient, super flowy, really like snappy and engaged. So one of my like favorite practical pieces of advice there is like hopping on, like doing an off the wall warm up, like stretching, doing a little hangboarding, getting your muscles and mind ready, including like a lot of breath work. Like how do you want to be breathing when you are actually climbing? Like warm that up before you get on the wall. But then when you hop on the wall, go do like a V0 or 4 or 5 times in a row, or a couple different ones, and just try and do it like super fast. And that, like I was talking about this during our clinic, but that kind of helps get that mind body connection solidified, and also just gets you moving how at least I want to be climbing in a competition where it is kind of subconscious and your limbs are just going where you want them to go, and you're able to like think and make really quick and accurate decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you also feel like maybe it's a setting preference within, like you're more used to the kind of USA style settings, so it gives you another kind of advantage, or do you feel like there's not much difference there?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it, but I mean, it's like the setting crew is an international crew, no matter where it is. But in Salt Lake, there's more American setters. So if anything, at least the comps that I've done really well at in Salt Lake were like slightly easier boulders that I was able to like execute really well on. Like I made semifinals, or I made finals because I did like all 4 of the climbs in like pretty low attempts. And same, like even just making semifinals, like I had to do like 4 out of the 5 climbs in like quite low attempts. Then I was like better at that. Like I could execute like in 4 minutes or in a couple tries, like closer to my limit, or like, but my highest limit I don't think was like crazy, like where like the best people at that comp could definitely like outclimb me in terms of like difficulty. But I could be consistent at like climbing to 90 to like 95% of my potential in a couple tries. But okay, well, actually, I want to rephrase that because that's at least maybe how I was thinking about it then. But I think that's because I never spent a ton of time like projecting really hard climbs, and then coming back and like talking to Al and Josh, they were like, okay, like I think you should spend more time like projecting really hard climbs, and then like really learning those moves so you can kind of increase that bar. But I will say, I think it's important to like kind of stagger like strength training to be like after like the execution, like all of the visualizing, breath work, like all these other tactics that allow you to like consistently climb close to your potential. Like if you're not climbing consistently to like 90% of your like physical limit, there's no point in adding strength to that equation. It actually makes it a lot harder to like be consistent and learn how to move well. So you kind of think about it like a staircase where like you get strong, or like for most people, right, like your X level of like strength, and then you work to like increase your execution and like understand how to like consistently climb at that level, and then you add on a little bit more strength and then learn how to do that same level of like execution and climbing with that new strength. Yeah, when I started working with Al, he basically was like, okay, you have to like forget how to climb completely and like relearn how to climb with this new kind of framework for like moving efficiently and climbing positionally and making time over the feet and under the hands, and like all of these concepts that don't work if you just like grab a hold and pull really hard. And I'm still like learning to do that now, where like I can sometimes just like overpower climbs because I'm pretty strong, and because I grew up like in the Bay Area climbing on these like pretty straightforward like power overhanging blocks. But then like the real power is like being able to do both of those, because sometimes you do need to just like have raw power. But even then you have to like, it's more efficient to approach it from like a movement and like positional standpoint.
So would you say that you don't really do much strength training nowadays?
No, I don't do like any right now. Well, okay, that's maybe not. Like, it depends what you mean by strength training, but like I haven't done like much weight lifting or like cycles of like hangboarding. Like I'll do a long warm up that includes like some block pulls and these like more like maintenance, or like slight, I guess they're like getting your fingers stronger, but it's not like I'm hangboarding for a bunch of hours every week or like lifting weights, or like a lot of it's like very functional. It's like functional mobility exercises where you're like trying to recreate positions on the wall and then just do a couple sets like twice a week. That's kind of all you need to get stronger. In a lot of cases, like it's a lot more efficient. Like there's a bunch of studies around like using drop sets or like end range, like strength, where it's kind of the same concept as like the like strength versus like execution. It's like with mobility, like if you're not able to like actually use your flexibility, then it doesn't really matter, and you should spend time like getting strong and like healthy in those end ranges, and then you add on a bit more like flexibility, and then you get strong again. So for like finger strength and things like that, like if your wrists aren't healthy and you're like your lumbricals can't take like the added strain of like having really strong fingers, it doesn't really matter. Like you have to be able to use that strength in like a functional range. And like especially with comp climbing, like there's all these crazy like presses and like weird types of like engagement where you have to like grab a hold at a really weird angle, like where your wrist is all like kind of cocked to the side.
Yeah.
Um, and if it's not ready to like take that force, then it doesn't really matter if you can do a one arm on like a 6 mil crimp.
Yeah, going back to like comps that you've done, you've also done some like other non-IFSC comp formats. I think I saw that you did like the team Boulder Arena in Paris, and then I've watched like a few other types of competitions. What other like formats have you competed in and enjoyed?
Yeah, the Team Boulder Arena 2 in Paris was like one of the most fun comp experiences I've had.
Nice.
So I was partners with Simone Lorenzi, and uh, I guess for people who don't know, I have made a YouTube video about it that explains like the whole format and everything. But the quick version is uh, for qualifiers, there were 20 climbs in this big like U-shaped climbing gym, and you or your partner had to do uh, each climb like in order. So it was 4 minutes on, and then you no rest period straight to the next one. But only like you or your partner had to do each climb, and they started off pretty easy. But around like 13, they kind of got trickier. So you'd kind of go around the circle, just trying all of them, and the climbs would each get progressively harder. And if you didn't do one of the blocks, then you were like out. So like the 13th problem was like this pretty tricky slab, and that got a bunch of teams. And then Simone carried us a fair amount. I felt like in qualifiers where he kept just like flashing them all, and I feel like I didn't have a chance to like get warm enough like on that like more compy style. Um, but he was also just like crushing it. So we did like all 20 of them, and then
Oh my
for
gosh.
finals, it was a pretty unique. Yeah, we were the only team to do all 20. And like Tomoa and a bunch of the other Japanese team, Kokoro, uh, and then like Paul and Mejdi, and like crazy crew at that comp. Hamish was there as well. Uh, and then for finals, they had one like really tricky slab climb, and one person from your team had to try it, and you had to flash it to get on to like the rest of the finals.
Oof.
So they had, yeah, and Simone tried it, and he wasn't able to do that one. It was like super low percentage, but like not super physically difficult. Um, so there are like 7 teams that made finals because we tied, and then like 3 of the teams fell on that first slab, and then everyone else. The format was like 4 minutes on, and you and your teammate could try them as many times like between the two of you. So it's just like a normal like IFSC format, 4 minutes on, like and a full like final. But you and your teammate were like on the same boulder. So I thought like it was a lot more strategy between you and your partner, like being able to communicate like what adjustments you would make, like what you learned from that attempt. And then also from a spectating standpoint, it was way more interesting to watch because there's just always someone on the wall. Um, so minus the flash boulder, I think that would be a pretty cool format to see more of.
Do you like competing in that kind of team way? Because I feel like I don't really like team sports because I feel really there's like extra pressure that you could also let down your teammate instead of like if you're just competing for yourself, you can only let down yourself. But then there's this
Shit.
like other person who's
Yeah.
also kind of counting on you, and I hate that pressure.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't want like every comp in the world to be like that format for sure. But for like a spectator focused, not spectator focused, but like a more like informal competition, I think it was more fun. And maybe it's just because it's like different as an athlete. It's kind of fun to like try and figure out like the strategy behind a different format like that. But I think yeah, that added pressure is definitely something to be aware of, and like maybe that's like a lesson or something you could learn from. Be like, oh, if I'm like worried about letting down like my partner, like why am I not confident in like my own abilities, and like how could I train that?
Mm.
Because it's the same thing as like I felt the same thing where like I didn't flash a couple of the climbs, And then Simone did it. I was like, oh shoot, like you kind of get caught up in this like negative thought cycle, and that's a really good time to practice like flipping flipping that downward spiral like into like an upward one, when you're like, okay, like I am confident in that, and like I am able to climb well, and just I guess those moments of like higher pressure when you actually can understand that and like learn that about yourself, and then it just is up to you to like make the most of that realization, I guess.
So yeah, I guess going into the mindset portion of things, that's something that you practice a lot of and that you preach a lot about. Um, can you like remember a time where you were like really close to losing your cool during a competition and then you were able to turn that around?
Yeah, I mean, there's like hundreds of situations like that, whether it's like on a full competition level, or like more commonly just on like a boulder, or like even attempt level, where you do one attempt on something and doesn't feel possible at all. And like, it's all just starts with like that awareness of like realizing like, oh, like I just started going down like the wrong path. Like, this feels too hard. I can't, blah, blah, blah. Like all these thoughts that are taking you out of like the here and now, and bringing you to like the there and then of what you could have done differently in your competition, or even like the future, like negative outcomes of like, oh, if I don't do this right now, then blah, blah, blah is going to happen. I won't win the comp, and I won't get to go to the World Cup, and blah, blah, blah. But like literally none of that is going to help you do the boulder in front of you. So just being really practical about like my goal, and like I owe it to myself. Like I owe it to all the training I've done to stay present and focused, and like show up the best version of myself that I can. And I think for me, being very, very honest with myself about what that actually means has been huge. And like in the gym or in your practice, or anytime you've like accomplished something big, like has that come from a place of like anger or like distracted, like, okay, like screw this climb, like I'm just gonna hop on and like give it one more attempt? Or was it because you like actually took a second to like breathe, like slow down, and like were more intentional with that attempt? And the vast majority, it's the latter. So being able to like notice that in a comp, and then really quickly reframe that like negative thought or whatever into like, okay, like this is actually an opportunity to like showcase all of the work I've put in. Or like, oh, I'm feeling stressed. That just means I really care about this thing. Like I feel stressed all the time, but I try and like reframe it into a like, oh, like this nervousness is just because I'm really passionate about climbing, and I want to show to myself and other people that like I put in this work, and like I learned this thing, and like I'm able to like climb to the best of my ability. But in order to do that, I need to like let go of all of those like expectations and any like kind of judgment around that, and just like believe in your ability to perform. And I think that can show up differently for people, like what that specific like motivational thing is. But in general, I think it's helpful to have it be like a reframe those like negative thoughts into like a positive like opportunity sort of thing, rather than a like, oh shit, like if I don't do this, this will be bad. And that's like a whole like growth mindset thing. And there's been like hundreds of studies on that. It's like framing it into this opportunity to learn and grow. And just allowing, I think it's important to allow yourself to still like feel disappointed or like nervous and all these like natural emotions. But just being like realistic about like what actually, when do you perform your best, or when do you feel your best, and then trying to train and get into that mindset as consistently as possible. That did not answer your question though. I think a specific time that I've like felt that struggle and then didn't really lose or close to losing it. There've been like the Salt Lake World Cups, for example, like in qualifiers, or actually like in or in finals for that comp, like didn't I didn't do the first boulder, and I knew I could have, and it felt easy. I was like, oh my God, like I didn't stay true to like my training. And there was a moment of like in ISO before going out for the second boulder of just like, what the heck? Like I just screwed up.
Like you also knew that everyone else did it? Or?
Yeah, no, I knew everyone else had done it, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like what, that was so silly. And then that's kind of like a really good cue for me to just like, I kind of visualize there being like 4 separate climbs like in my mind, and like you walk through like one door, and then like that's one climb. It's pretty isolated from the next climb. So like spend the time, like reflect on it. And if it's like a 4-minute round, right? You only have like 4 minutes to rest. Maybe spend 30 seconds thinking about that last boulder and be like, okay, like, dang, I didn't do it. This is what I could have done. I could have taken another breath, or just like slow down, be a bit more present, and then completely let it go. Like close that door. Like maybe you visualize like a bubble, and each bubble is like, has its little climb in it, and then that bubble kind of just vanishes, and then it's only like the 3 next climbs. So I was proud of that kind of reframing in ISO there, and I think I ended up just kind of being like, okay, like that was silly. Like obviously I could have done that climb because it's not super physically hard, and I was just a little too angsty, like too much energy, too much thought, like cluttering my ability to just climb how I climb. And for me, like that's a huge like realization, is like you climb your best when you're able to like execute these moves on a subconscious level. And that's true for like pretty much any high performer in the world. Like I did a bunch of studying around like flow states and these like moments of peak performance, and it's called like transient hyperfrontality, when like the prefrontal cortex kind of slows down and you're performing these tasks at like a more subconscious level. And so like just taking the time to like do a breathing routine or like a little meditation thing or whatever it is, to get into that more like present, like decluttered state of mind is hugely important. So that's what I did. I just like laid down on my back in the grass in the back of the ISO zone.
Nice.
And kind of reset, and then came out to the second boulder and was able to do it. And then the same thing happened on the third boulder, where I maybe could have slowed down the heart rate and like recentered a bit more after like the energy of the second boulder. And then I like slowed it down again after that, and then was able to do the last boulder. But that's kind of only something you can, not only, but that was like my first World Cup final. And it's hard to like learn how to deal with that like pressure and everything without actually being in that situation. So I think giving yourself like that little breathing room to like learn a new just learn a new like, not system, but like how to like practice and like be yourself in this new environment is really important. And like the weekend before was, I made like semifinals, and then I had kind of like that same amount of like over psych, like over cluttered energy in the semifinals that led to me being like a couple spots out of finals. And then I was like, okay, like next weekend, like really slow it down. Don't let yourself like dump all of your adrenaline after the first boulder in qualifiers, right? Like you kind of have to play this longer game. And it is kind of a game like that. Like you need a lot of like mental stamina to like get through 3 rounds of really hard climbing, especially when they're like these really high performance like execution rounds where like you have to top every boulder in qualifiers and semis to make a final. Like that's why it's so inconsistent like in the top of like the field, because even though like everyone is crazy strong and capable of like doing all of these boulders, the only people that are like really consistent are the ones that are like able to regulate that like kind of mindset and like only put out enough energy to like do the climbs and then recover enough before semifinals or before finals to do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. Well, it also seems a lot more inconsistent in like the men's side, whereas like on the women's side, it seems like there's usually the same kind of people making finals and winning finals, but I feel like men's is
Yeah.
all over the place.
Yeah. I think, I don't, this might be wrong, but it seems like there's the top of the women's field is like more distinguished between the bottom of the women's field in terms of like strength and mentality. So like they can have a day where they only perform to like 60% of their potential, but they're still making finals because like that potential is just like so much higher than like the bottom half. Whereas the men's field, like maybe a higher percentage of the field is like meets that like strength threshold required by the climbs, if that makes sense. And it becomes more of like an execution game, like who's able to like keep it together mentally and like be consistent with their climbing. Yeah, that could be completely wrong, but that's kind of a theory.
No, yeah, I kind of see that as well. But yeah, going back to what you had said earlier, you had mentioned like meditation. One of the Discord questions that came in was about your thoughts on meditation. They were wondering if you find meditation to be easier in isolation or if you also do it a lot when you're like actively climbing, like on the rock or on the um, boulder during a competition.
Yeah, I find it helpful pretty much all the time, but it is a very it's tricky to like be consistent with it, especially when traveling, I find. Um, so I think having like just some non-negotiables for that, like, all right, every morning, just like 5 minutes of just like sitting and just like breathing. And if your mind wanders somewhere else, like that's totally okay. Just bring it back to your breath or like closing your eyes and kind of like focusing on that third eye or whatever it is. Like you can kind of like play around and find what feels the best for you. But my routine was or is like trying to find like 10 to 20 minutes in the morning to just like sit outside and just do a breathing meditation. And then if it's before a competition, like actually visualizing like what it's going to feel like to be in that environment. Like if it's a gym that you've competed at before, a venue you've been at before, like put yourself in isolation, like visualize yourself like doing your same breath sequence or whatever it is, like in that chair in ISO, feeling confident in the chair. And then like visualize yourself in front of the wall. If you know like what the wall angles are, you could go through like for each of like the different like slabs or overhang or whatever. Kind of visualize like yourself breathing, doing your routine, putting your shoes on at like 1 minute or 2 minutes, standing up and like just feeling like psyched and confident, like whatever you want to feel like in that moment, feel that same way and like prime your nervous system to feel that same way before the comp. So I'll do that a lot, even if I don't know the same, like what every venue is like. It's my, like I have the same routine, like that 4 minutes is like the same no matter where I am. And so like visualizing that and kind of like downloading that, that sequence of like feelings and like that energy, I think is really important. And then once you're in ISO, you just like kind of replay that same sequence, at least from like a mindset standpoint. Like your warm up might be a little different because like the warm up zones are always going to be different or whatever it is. But as long as you can get to that same like place of feeling like really confident and psyched and just like all this good energy, I find that's like a really consistent place to approach a competition from. And then it's like in isolation, I'll try and find like maybe 10 minutes before I start warming up to just go sit and like breathe. And then at least 10 minutes before I go out, like in the half hour before I go out, to just go sit and breathe and kind of slow your heart rate down and uh, for me, it's a lot easier to approach a boulder with like this calm, collected state of mind rather than like hyping yourself up a ton. And then you turn around and it's a slab climb and you have to be like super delicate. Like it's a lot easier to, for me at least, I mean, I think this goes for most people, but easier to like increase the level of energy in your body than it is to like slow it down. So if you turn around and it's actually like a big, huge dyno with like some crazy small crimps you have to like power scream on, then it's easy to just like power scream, like slap yourself on your shoulders a little bit and like increase the level of energy to the level that the boulder requires. But more often than not, especially in a competition with like all of this extra energy coming from the crowd and environment and just more stress than you might be used to, you really have to work to like bring your heart rate down to the level of the boulder. And I guess this is not directly related to meditation, but trying to seek that energy level out in your training, I think is really important too. Like if every single competition you do, you're feeling like, okay, like there's a lot of energy here and like I'm not able to execute how I normally do because like my mind is just going 100 miles an hour. Maybe practice doing that in your training and get like comfortable and confident executing with all of that extra kind of energy. Or like it's a balance between that and also just getting really good at like slowing your heart rate down and like decluttering your mind. So it just feels like another day of climbing at the gym. Like that's when I feel the best is like in Salt Lake. I didn't even know the crowd was there for like the boulders that I did, you know, for any competition that you like do really well at. Like when you get into that flow state, like that transient hyperfrontality that I said before, like that actually means you're not thinking about like anything but like the present. And part of your brain function that like slows down and kind of deactivates is the region that controls like time. So things start to like feel like they're in slow motion and you do a boulder, you're like, whoa, like what just happened? Also the same system that distinguishes you from the rest of the world. Like this distinguishes you from like the pads or the air around you, like that kind of starts to fade away. So you're literally like one with whatever you're doing. And it's a pretty special like place to feel like that connected. And I'm sure anyone listening and you as well can like relate to a moment where you felt like that amount of like presence and you've like topped the boulder, got done with a run, or like, I don't know, even finished writing like an email or essay, whatever it is. And you're like, whoa, like what the heck? Like where was I? Like that was some really cool place I was just at. So just trying to like practice getting to that state of mind more consistently is huge. And like, that's my ultimate goal is like, if you could tap into that amount of like focus and concentration on demand, like you'd be invincible. You wouldn't, but it'd be pretty close.
Yeah, no, it's one of the best feelings.
Yeah.
You've also, I think I've heard you mention in like previous podcasts or interviews, you've mentioned like being comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I feel like I can relate to that phrase a bit. How do you feel like you apply that to climbing and life in general?
Totally. That's a great question. Honestly, what I was talking about with the visualization before is like a huge piece of that, like visualizing yourself being uncomfortable, even like on a specific move. Maybe you're like visualizing a scary move on a slab where you have to like rock over a bad foot. It's totally natural to like feel a little scared and like have that increase in like adrenaline as you like step onto that foot and realize like, oh shit, I have to like fully trust this thing. I might fall down this whole wall or like slip out of nowhere. So when you're on the ground, like visualize yourself. Like there's a couple cool studies that were showing that the most efficient way to visualize is actually in the third person first. So like projecting yourself onto the wall. I kind of do it like in slow motion, like, okay, like what are the different ways I could do this boulder? And then once I figure out how I want to try it, like what the most efficient way is, then I'll visualize that same thing in the first person. So what does it actually feel like to trust this foot, overcome that like feeling of fear? Like you can pretty much get yourself to feel like the same way you're going to feel on the wall once you like practice it a lot and like align that mental representation with like the actual physical representation, and get to the point where you can like overcome that little bit of like fear and that like heightened mindset on the wall, and then you climb up there and you actually get to it like, oh, I've already trusted this foot in my mind. I'm comfortable in the situation, and then you can execute with a like way less doubt and like way less distractions than you otherwise could. So I think that's a pretty fun exercise to try. And I could talk a lot more about like that visualization piece of things, but working towards like aligning that like mental representation and like that first person like feeling of actually doing the move really efficiently with how you actually do it is huge, and pretty crucial for like figuring out complex sequences in a quick period of time. Like in the gym, if we're learning a move, right, you can have a phone out and like go watch and be like, oh, okay, like I didn't land my foot where I wanted to, or like my hips were not moving with the trajectory I thought they were going to be. But in a comp, you can't have that, right? There's no coaches or people that like help you. So you need to have a really accurate mental representation so you can like get off the wall after you fall or whatever and be like, okay, well, I wanted to do this, but really my hips were doing this and my hand wasn't accurate here. And then you can kind of reassess, try and get a better plan of action. And then this goes back to like kind of the fundamentals of like getting into flow states, but you don't want to be like thinking super critically about like, okay, I want my hand to go exactly here and pulling this hard on that. Like that's just too much to think about, and that's bringing your brain and focus back into like that very executive thinking side of things rather than that subconscious thing. So if you're able to visualize it well, like have that goal, visualize it 2 or 3 times in your head, be like, okay, this is what it feels like to do this move efficiently. Then you take the deep breath, smile, let go of like that very specific goal, and just have the intention to like move well, and your body can take care of the rest. And if you're good at that, then you hop back on the wall and you're able to like execute and do it like you've already done the move, you know? So in training, like practicing aligning those two and repeating climbs a lot so your body is able to kind of execute moves at a subconscious level is super important. And I guess the last thing I'll say there is like being okay, like resetting like that while you're on the wall is huge. So I think your question about mindset before was like in ISO versus on the wall. I wouldn't call it meditation when you're on the wall, but finding brief moments to like close your eyes and maybe do like a double inhale, which has been proven to be like the best way to slow down your heart rate and kind of get into that super calm, focused state of mind. And there's a lot more like scientific language around all of this than what I'm describing now. But I think it's easier to understand just in a quick podcast format. Like that double inhale is super important. And that's like the basis of like my whole breathing routine before the climbing. But also like on the wall, if I can find a quick little stance or moment on a boulder just to reset, close my eyes and then get back into it. I think that's huge.
Yeah, I tried that during the comp and it helped. Well, I don't really know if it helped, but it did calm me down a bit. So yeah, that was a good tip. I think everyone should try that out.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's a cool podcast from Huberman on the more nitty-gritty of why and how that's possible. It's like all of the alveoli in your lungs are expanding more when you do that double inhale. You actually do it like subconsciously, like every 5 minutes, it was shown. And it like unsticks all of these little membranes in your lungs that process oxygen. So you're able to like literally process more oxygen, which helps calm your body down because it's like, oh, surviving. I'm getting the air that I need to like think and breathe. Um, so when you do that consciously, it does the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, I think everyone should try it out. See if it helps anytime you're doing something that is a little uncomfortable. But yeah, going into your non-climbing hobbies, you've already mentioned that you do a lot of surfing. You also do like trad, which is climbing, but it's a very different form of it, I feel like.
Yeah.
Um, what have you, well, first of all, are you ever like concerned about getting injured from these sports? Because I think I've heard from other like World Cup competitors that they're either like not allowed to do outside sports for like concernment injury, or they're just like not really interested because they don't want to get injured. Is that ever like a concern for you?
Um, Not really. I think that the concern is more around like just where my focus is and like if my intention is to do really, really well at a World Cup, like being honest with myself about like if surfing like for 5 hours straight is going to help the training I'm supposed to do later that day. But in general, I think it's really healthy for me to like have these other creative outlets and other opportunities to like kind of practice like the same routines that I'm bringing into like climbing. Like when we talk about flow, like those habits and routines, the same stuff that helps you get into like a flow state during a competition helps you to perform at like any other discipline of life. Um, so I'm not saying that I'm going out surfing, like thinking about like training for climbing. Um, but when a big wave comes and your heart rate increases, like that's the same feeling when you run out and there's 1,000 people like all cheering and the music is crazy loud and the lights are flashing in your eyes. You turn around and see like some absurd boulder. Like that's very, very similar feeling. So when that huge set wave comes and like you gotta like slow your heart rate down, like I'm doing the same double inhale, long exhale, and kind of visualizing myself paddling, dropping it and like feeling really confident and like executing. So I think that helps with climbing or like lots of other forms of life. And the same thing goes for like skiing or mountain biking, or yeah, like trad climbing, like I was kind of describing earlier with the Hulk. It's all just like a mind thing. Like if your body is able to do it, it's just a question of like, are you able to allow your body to do it? Like you got to get out of your own way, if that makes sense. Like you practice so your body knows how to perform a certain task. And then a lot of times in moments of like high pressure, the only reason you're not able to do that is because you're thinking too much and you're kind of standing in your own way. So like understanding that and then developing your own routines to get into that more focused, concentrated place is huge.
And so outside of, I guess, like the mindset part of it, do you feel like there's anything physical that you've learned from these other sports that you can bring into climbing?
Yeah, I mean, I think a ton of like growing up, we were always like going camping outside and just running around on like redwood trees and falling across rivers and stuff like that. And then a lot of skiing as well. And like the balance aspect of that is huge. And like the proprioception that comes from like having to control your skis, or if you're surfing, like hopping up and like being able to move the board how you want to. Same with like trail running or like rock hopping. I feel like we'd always go to this one spot in Tahoe that has these rocks that are like just poking up above the water, and we would, or like not we, I would try and like run around between them all, and like you start running and you like have the momentum where you like have to like jump to the next rock, otherwise you're gonna like fall in this like icy lake. But I feel like that was really fun to just get comfortable, like committing to like kind of risky moves like that. And that kind of ties into another big flow trigger, which is like the challenge skill ratio. So practicing at that sweet spot where it's difficult for you and like pushes you to like actually learn and execute at the best of your ability, but isn't so hard that it's gonna discourage you from like learning the move or whatever it is, or it's like too much of a challenge for your body. So they found that about like 4% is the ideal spot to be at with whatever you're doing. So like 4% harder or more uncomfortable than what you've done in the past or what you're comfortable with like in that exact moment. So if you apply that like to a warm up, like if you haven't climbed hard yet, that 4% increase is not that big. Like it's just like 4% above like V0 or whatever that is, you know? But then once you're really warm, then you have to like push up that challenge skill ratio so you can keep learning like at that edge. And I think to make it a bit more climbing specific, like before I was talking about like I warm up off the wall and then hop on V0. That V0 is not pushing that challenge skill ratio from like a physical standpoint, right? Because I've done a bunch of hangboarding, mobility, like my body and mind are ready to like climb harder than V0. But by trying to do it really quickly and trying to be really accurate and flowy with the feet and coordinating your hands and generation all at the same time, now you're upping the challenge skill ratio where you're forcing your body to like kind of rise to the occasion and perform at a higher level than just climbing it like super slow and controlled. So you can make the challenge skill ratio hard for you in different ways. And even like this last week in the bay, climbing on disgustingly greasy climbs that were not set terribly well. Like I was doing that a lot with my friends. Sorry, setters. This does not go for benchmark or mosaic or the boulder field.
Wow, this is just a touchstone hate episode.
You said it, not me. No. Half joking, but I think upping that challenge skill ratio in other ways is super important. And then that like goes with anything you're learning. Like you have to be really like honest and maybe like let go of your ego a little bit to learn as quickly as you can. Like there's plenty of moves that I like have not learned, and you'll get on, you'll be like, wow, like I need to like really take a step back and like let go of what I thought I was doing and like assess it from like the ground up and be like, okay, what are like the fundamentals of this move? And having like frameworks like what we taught in the clinic, like space-time position and these other things that I'm not going to go into super deep right now because they're just more nuanced coaching concepts that we'll share on another podcast or coaching video.
Take a mind to motion clinic.
Yeah, it's a shameless plug. Actually, yeah, we're doing a couple at the boulder field in the bay, and then I'm going up to Bend to teach a couple national clinics up there, and then might try and do a clinic in Seattle as well. So lots of fun upcoming coaching things, excuse me.
Well, this isn't coming out until probably a month, but after that, they can check. I'll add the link to the website.
For sure. But just being like realistic with yourself and being like, if I haven't done like a crazy lâché to like a blocked crimp on a really bad foot, like there's no way you're just gonna like all of a sudden be like Superman and do that move, you know? So like really tone it down. And that's a big part of our clinics is like adding those progression holds so you can practice at a level that's makes sense for you. Learn the move, learn like why it's efficient to like generate in a certain way or like what the end position is, and then make it a little bit harder and make it a little bit harder, make it a little bit harder. And then you get to like the harder variation and it's like feels super easy. And so kind of like reverse engineering that and like doing the same thing in your warm up is huge. Like getting on an easier climb, doing it really well, and then you bring that same like level of execution and flow and confidence to your harder climbs. But for me, that's really fun to practice in other sports or disciplines outside of climbing. and try and like push that challenge skill ratio quickly and like learn these new ways to like move and think, whether that's like skiing or surfing or whatever it is. Ping pong is super fun as well. Ping pong might be like the most like flow inducive thing that I do, where like after like a couple games of warming up, you're just like so locked in and having to like think and move so quickly. Or like, sorry, you're not thinking because like it's so quick that it has to just be subconscious. So you're like, oh, you're just playing and not even thinking about like how you're playing. You just do.
How long have you been playing ping pong?
I mean, I played a bunch like in high school. I'm not like a competitive ping pong player or anything, but
sure.
And yeah, that would be kind of fun actually. Maybe we're gonna look into some San Diego ping pong leagues. But we had like a table at my high school, and we'd always just play during like lunch and in between classes and everything.
I feel like that's a good sport to get into, that you don't have to be super, well, I don't know. Do you have to be super fit for ping pong? It feels like a long-lasting sport.
I don't think so, yeah. Maybe a good like wrist warm up as well. Playing with your non-dominant hand too is really fun. Like I've been doing that a bunch recently and I've gotten so much better. Like I can play like decently well now with my left hand, whereas like a couple of years ago I like couldn't hit it back on the right side of the table. So that's kind of a fun challenge, or like brushing your teeth with your left hand, or eating, or like using chopsticks. I've been doing that at like sushi places recently, like trying to just eat everything with my left hand and using the chopsticks. Makes you slow down.
Wait, what do you feel like that helps you with?
Just like being better at like using your other hand. Like I feel like people like for climbing, right? Like there's no reason like
I guess
if you have to be really accurate with climbing and like grabbing holds and like being able to engage quickly or like articulate your hand in a certain way to like do whatever you're doing. And so having like a more even like homunculus map in your head, right, I think is going to be really helpful. If you think about the moves in a competition, look at how many of the like skates or dynos go to the right versus how many go to the left. And that's because all the setters are like, the majority are like right-handed. So it's more comfortable to go to the right. And that's started to change more recently. But people are like climb better going the direction or like grabbing holds with their like most dominant hand. So like trying to even that out is a place for everyone to improve at. Or if you think about like how comfortable and how accurate you can be like with your hands versus your feet, like that's a huge thing that people can improve at with climbing. Like half of climbing, maybe even more, is like how well you can like move your feet and like get over your hips and like pull with your feet. But we spend like zero time, at least like on my, like when I was learning to climb, we didn't do a lot of like foot accuracy exercises or things like that. So that was like part of the warm-up exercises I was showing everyone in that clinic that you did, was like warming up your mind and feet to have that same level of like accuracy and confidence you can have with your hands.
So I guess you could start like brushing your teeth and eating sushi with your feet too.
With your feet, yeah. That's a good idea. I might start doing that.
Yeah.
That's funny. One quick little tip around that is like another big flow trigger is just specific goals. Like you're never going to get better or like learn something if you don't have like a goal for what you're trying to do. And the more specific you can be with that, whether you're right or wrong, like there's a bunch of studies that have shown like just making a hypothesis before you do something will help you learn what you're trying to learn, regardless of whether your hypothesis was right or wrong. So if you're doing a skate move or whatever it is, like be really specific with where you want to have your foot land on the volume. And then that'll help you like actually build those like motor neurons and like be able to like align like that mental representation as well as you can with that physical, with the physical move.
Okay. So yeah, those were your, I guess, like sports, non-climbing hobbies.
Yeah, I guess I played basketball a fair amount. I just started swimming. for like some more cardio stuff, Al was saying. So like the last 3 days, no, every other day, for the last 6 days, so 3 days total, I've swam like a half mile, which was brutal, but now it's feeling a lot more natural. And yeah, it's definitely a really cool full body workout.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot. So quick overview of all the sports you do. Just list all of the ones that you're into right now.
Okay, I'd say in terms of like time spent right now, it's swimming, or no, not swimming, surfing, and then probably swimming right now, and then like skiing, but it's summer, so I haven't done that in a bit. And then like basketball, and then ping pong at the gym or whatever, and then like biking, a fair amount of that. I've been trying to like do some road biking every now and then, just because it's fun and another way to get your heart rate up. And then like mountain biking, if I'm back home in the Bay or with somebody who has a good mountain bike.
Wow, it's a lot. Yeah, outside of your sports hobbies, you also have a lot of like creative hobbies with your YouTube channel and like photography as well. How do you fit YouTube into your climbing and training and traveling schedule? Because it is a lot with all the things you like doing.
Yes, it is. It is a lot. That I've definitely been a lot less consistent with. And like at the beginning, like the first season, I was like on the World Cup circuit with Tim. We were like, oh, like we should just do this YouTube thing together, and it'd be fun to just like kind of document like all these experiences and like the places we're going. And then, yeah, with like school and training and doing all these other hobbies, it was kind of hard to be consistent with that. So, I would definitely like to be making higher quality content more consistently. I feel like this year I'm finally in a place where I have the time, because I'm like graduated from school, and have a bit more freedom, like financially, with sponsors and coaching and stuff like that, to like do that at a higher level. But it's still very difficult, and something I'm learning about and like doing, or have just a lot to improve at. Like, because right up until now, like the vast majority of the stuff on my channel is like I've done the editing for, which is tricky and like a whole nother profession to learn, and I'm like not anywhere close to being like a good video editor, but it like works. And I think, well, okay, now it's kind of like the limiting factor is like how much time I can spend editing. So trying to work with like a more professional crew of people who like film and edit that stuff,
Nice.
has been a fun challenge, and I have got a bunch of cool content coming out. So, I finally have a cool video from the Seco Block in Chicago last year. That was like super, super cool event. And like met Chris Sharma there, and that ended up turning into like a trip to Mallorca, which I also have a cool video about that may actually be out by the time this video comes out.
Sick.
And then a couple other trips, like to Yosemite, like doing 7 days straight of climbing in Yosemite between like bouldering and trad climbing and big wall climbing and sport climbing and like single pitch trad. So that should be kind of a fun recap montage video of like just a week of trying a bunch of things there. Lots of time in the river. Yeah, photography, I guess, began as just like this really fun way to like capture moments from trips all over and like share those with friends and family. And then it's just a cool creative outlet. Like trying to look at different angles or different lighting or kind of capture different like feelings and shots. And I definitely am not my roommates are both like professional photographers and videographers, and like looking at their work, it's like, oh my God, like you're a true artist. And I'm definitely not at that level, but it is fun to like kind of share some of these images and things outside of the climbing world. And I think it takes a bit of the edge off of like, I'm not just a professional climber. Like I don't do well in a competition or whatever. It's like not the end of the world, even though I really want to, but it just comes back to like that awareness of like, I want to do this because I'm like really psyched and passionate about this. And having those other things that you're like excited about doing, I think helps to lead a more balanced life.
Yeah, you don't feel the pressure that this is like the only thing that you can do, and that it's so you like have to perform, because otherwise your life is over.
Yeah, again, it goes back to like framing it into like that positive like opportunity to like do really well. Like I've trained and like I'm really passionate about this. So I want to like perform well, but I'm not bringing in all of this, like the negativity of like, oh, I have to because my dad says he really wants me to, or like my coach is going to be sad if I don't, or like whatever it is, you know. I feel like a lot of people like actually have those kind of thoughts going through their head, and I was definitely fortunate to have like a very supportive crew of people around me, including like my family and coaches and all that.
Yeah, and then also like through YouTube, you've kind of gotten yourself into like some coaching opportunities. Do you have like a proudest coaching moment?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, overall, YouTube just started off as being like a really fun way to like share these moments, but evolved into like a really cool way to articulate my own processes at a higher level. And like, I feel like I learn a lot just by trying to share tips and tricks along the way. And then even just filming all like more of my sessions was a really cool way to like go back and like actually learn and like connect that representation of like what I thought I was doing with what I was actually doing. For an actual coaching moment, like going over to Austria and coaching the youth national team there
Really?
last summer was really cool. I'm actually about to post a video from that trip. It's just like a travel montage of like 4 weeks in Europe, and I think the title will be something like training / like staying fit while traveling. And it was a hard trip in that sense because we were just like moving around and like just staying in a camper van that we rented, and it was like tricky to like be consistent with my training. And the ultimate takeaway was like just having a couple really valuable like non-negotiables for each day is huge. But the coaching in Austria was amazing. So they had like their own training center there. And I spent like 2 days with this one. There's like, it was in Dornbrin, but it was like their youth national team that like trains together, and they're all go to like a sports school there. So their coach can just take them out whenever to like have training practices, and everyone's kind of on the same schedule. And yeah, it was really cool. Like to think about the training environment that they had created there, that their coach Max had created, was super powerful. And you have a bunch of kids at like different age levels and abilities that are all like working together and like in a really collaborative, like rich training environment. So like that's ultimately what all of our mind to motion clinics are trying to like replicate as well. So that was pretty cool to work with. And then we did another mind to motion clinic where the main focus was just on breathing and visualization. Those were like our two big takeaways that we wanted these kids to walk away with. And at the very beginning, we like asked everyone, or can we like explain these concepts? We're like, okay, our goal is to like have you guys feel like really confident with these two things. Like if you only 2 things you learned and you're like able to like tell your parents like, hey, like this is what I learned, like breathing, like the double inhale specifically, and kind of the visualization aspect, and hearing all the kids at the end of the clinic. Like there were a couple times during the clinic when we like sat everyone down and like, okay, like what's one thing you've like learned so far, and like what's one thing we want to keep learning, or like how are you going to implement this into your daily routine so you like actually feel confident enough to like use it in a competition. Hearing like 12 out of like the 15 people or whatever, they're like, oh, like the breathing techniques and like the mental kind of reframing was like so helpful, and I know I'm going to use that in the next competition. That was a pretty cool moment, because like that's what I would have wanted to learn when I was their age as well, and I think that would have helped me like so much. So that's, yeah, it's been a really rewarding way to like kind of connect with climbers, old and young.
Yeah, I kind of feel like teaching kids these, like young kids, these techniques of like staying focused and in the moment is probably really helpful for them though, because I don't know, kids can be kind of crazy with their emotions.
Totally.
They definitely
Yeah.
not always regulated yet. So
Totally. Yeah. It's a fun challenge. I'm like, how do you synthesize like this pretty complex like process of like down regulating and getting into this like state of transient hyperfrontality? Like, how do you explain that to like a 10-year-old?
yeah.
And that's like super rewarding when it works. And just like simplifying those goals as much as possible. Like, all right, like every attempt, like I want to like hear you take a deep breath before you get on the wall, and then allowing them to like feel the difference. And like you're not trying to directly tell them like how to do any one move, but you're kind of just giving them hints. And then they have like that aha moment of like, oh my gosh, like this is how it works. Or like, oh, it's like taking that deep breath like really makes a huge difference. Or like just smiling is like floods your brain with all these like positive neurochemicals that allow you to like climb better. Yeah, so that's been fun for sure.
Okay, awesome. I think that is a good place to end those questions. Real quick, we'll go into some of the Discord questions that came in. So first one, how do you effectively use skincare products like Rhino Skin Repair, Performance, and or others for comp climbing? And what should be the goal of filing your skin down? I think I see that you have Rhino Skin in the background, so it's perfect.
Oh yeah, I do. That's right next to my bed actually.
Yeah, I recognize it.
um, I guess my tip there is like you need to have like a good layer, like healthy layer of skin before you like start drying it out a bunch. So like you kind of have to be thinking like a week or two ahead, you know, if you're going on a trip outside or preparing for a comp or whatever. You want your skin to be very different for those two situations. Yeah, like so I use like Repair like almost daily, and I think that's just a really good base that like helps your skin stay healthy. And then Performance has a little bit of like antihydral in it, or like the same active chemical as antihydral. And then Dry is like a more concentrated version of that. So I'll use like Performance sometimes, like, I don't know, once a week or whatever, if I'm like in the same area. And then Dry spray before competitions, like it takes a couple days to like activate, I feel like, or before going outside. But it's really easy to like have your skin be too hard. And I was like surfing a bunch before this last week going to the bay. So my skin was like a little softer than normal. So I put on a bunch of Dry spray. And then I went to the bay, which is like less humid than San Diego because you're like in the peninsula and not like quite as close to the water. Like I live like right next to the beach. So my skin is like, it got used to like that level of humidity. And then I put a bunch of Dry spray on and went to like a slightly drier area. And my skin was like so hard and polished, which did not help with the greasy holds.
The
and
worst.
then, yeah. So like that's a situation where like filing your skin can be helpful actually. Or definitely like filing the creases, like where your finger bends. Or I'll use like a razor blade to cut off any like excess skin in there.
Oh gosh.
Or when I use Dry spray, I try and like wipe, like use a towel or my shirt or whatever to like wipe out the Dry spray from those creases, so it doesn't get like just right in between the pads of my finger, like super hard, because then it just like hurts. If like your whole hand is like leather, it just makes it harder to like bend your fingers.
I don't think I've quite gotten to that point, but good to know.
Yeah. So like filing down that, or like using a razor blade, or also like gua shaing it, like using one of these like the little scraper tools, and just like scraping your whole finger or like just those joints to help them move a bit more fluidly and get the skin less leathery, or even like help flush out any scar tissue that's in the joints there. is a good little tip. Um, yeah, I think that kind of covers it for skincare. But just yeah, if your skin is really soft, adding dry spray or like these hardening agents is gonna be a very temporary and like bad fix, because then you'll have like one or two layers of like really hard skin over a layer like of like soft, icky skin. And then you've got like just a couple attempts of like hard fiberglass climbing before that skin layer is like gone and you're to like this soggy layer underneath. So it's like better to just be patient and like grow good skin and then have like the whole composite of it be like at the appropriate level of hardness.
Yeah, I really hate like the hard skin. I find that if that I climb better if my skin is not super dry. It just like I don't know, it sticks into the holds better.
No, I agree. For like indoor climbing, there's definitely, well, I guess it also depends like what style and like type of holds you're climbing on. Like
Mm,
pure fiberglass, you can get away with like having your skin a lot harder than like some other textured like types of plastic and stuff like that.
makes sense. Okay, next question. How do you incorporate climbing outdoors into your training? Any
Oh, it's a good
projects?
question. Yeah, lots of projects. Too many projects. I need to be more intentional with what I'm trying. I've been like relatively good with that this year. But I think depending on what you're training for, again, like having specific goals. But if you're training for like a comp, um, outdoor climbing can be very conducive to that. If you are like, okay, I'm going to practice like executing and like flashing this boulder, and then again, like bringing that challenge skill awareness to that, like how hard can you actually flash? Like trying to make it an appropriate level so you actually can do that. That's like for me one of the most fun forms of climbing. It's like on-sighting or like flashing boulders, or sport climbs for that matter. But I just haven't done as much of that recently. Um, but like in Yosemite, I was able to flash King Air, which is like this super cool, pretty high ball, a very high ball B10 that Dean Potter first ascended, and just like visualizing that and like again like the same techniques as you'd bring to a comp, but for an outdoor boulder. I like wrapped down it and just like looked at the hold so I knew what I was like grabbing, because like in a comp you would know kind of what the holds are. Um, but then like in that environment, you don't have all this added outside pressure and you can kind of try it on your own timetable. So I spent like 45 minutes at the base of this thing, just like looking at it and getting into like the perfect headspace. And then I did it and it felt exactly how I like visualized it and imagined it to be. And that feeling was so, so fun. Um, where I got to the top, I was like, oh my God, I didn't even look down. Like you're 25 plus feet up, like doing like decently hard climbing. Um, maybe, yeah, 25 is probably the limit. And I was like, oh, I didn't look down, wasn't aware at all of like anything but what was right in front of me. Otherwise, like, I think it's valuable to like be able to like pull on hard crimps and like kind of be comfortable in the uncomfortable in that sense. So even like a couple of years ago, there was a training cycle that my buddy Marco and I did that actually Enrico, who you were talking to, um, recommended, where we trained like in the gym, 3 days in the gym, 1 day outside. And then we did that for like 4 weeks straight. And that was a really cool process because it just got your mind so ready to like pull hard and like try hard and like kind of trained the grit and like the determination to just like not let go, you know? And then you bring that same mindset to the gym and you're like way more comfortable like trying hard on uncomfortable things.
Awesome. Okay. This person wants you to know they're a big fan of the Uncut Blocks series on YouTube.
Oh, sweet.
And they want to know any memorable moments from your early years climbing in the Bay and favorite gyms in the Bay. which you clearly have some very strong opinions on.
Yeah, you should just go to the boulder field if you're anywhere remotely close. I mean, growing up in the Bay, it was a really cool like environment because we like had that really strong team and some really good coaches that were like talking about a lot of the things I've talked about like on this podcast and just thinking about more than how strong your fingers are and how many one-arm pull-ups you can do, you know? I mean, Planet Granite, San Francisco, I guess it's Movement SF now, right in the Presidio, like right underneath the Golden Gate Bridge is always a pretty cool venue. And I remember doing like a training day there with my whole team where we like ran across the Golden Gate Bridge, like from the gym, we like raced all the way up across the Golden Gate Bridge and back to the gym. And that was like the start of our practice. And I remember getting back and throwing up because I was trying to beat this one kid. I wasn't very good at running. That's the only time I've ever actually thrown up from training. So yeah, don't do that. But yeah, that was just like a cool gym and like pretty unique walls at the time. Now they're definitely a bit dated, but just a cool environment to be in, be able to like look at the Golden Gate Bridge and the whole Bay Area there. Sessions in Santa Rosa, Kevin Jorgensen's gym is also quite good. So if you're in the Bay Area, or like Berkeley or something like that, that could be worth going to. Mosaic is really nice as well. That's newer and pretty small, but right in Berkeley. But they always have a couple good comp climbs. And then Benchmark is also pretty nice. Not as much like compy stuff, but they've got a really nice spray wall that like Keenan and Katie train on a lot. That's definitely like the best spray wall in the Bay Area, like outdoor style, like hard crimping spray wall. But there's really not a lot of like good comp climbs, like 10 good comp climbs, I would say, in the whole Bay Area at any given moment.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, that's like with a pretty harsh standard, but
do you feel like it's a lot better here in San Diego?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Grotto has a good bit. I don't think I see as much in Mesa Rim, but yeah.
It kind of depends. Mesa used to have like some of the best setting, and then some of the setters left and like went other places. But on the ropes front, I think they still have some of the best climbs, like some of the best commercial set rope climbs in the nation for sure. So yeah, props to that. North City usually has some pretty nice boulders as well.
Oh, right. It's just a little far.
But yeah, at that point, we have like our own space at the wall, which is a really tiny old gym. But then Al built out a whole backspace, like a training zone there, so we can just set whatever we want and get a bit more experimental with movement. And then he has like the most heinous spray wall I've like ever climbed on, where like every move you just have to like be very intentional with like the position and how you're like holding the holds and using your feet and everything like that.
Okay. Another question, and then I think we might have time for one more depending on how fast your answer is.
Sure.
Favorite non-US competitors or teams to train with?
Whoa. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really cool teams to train with. I've climbed with like the French team quite a bit, and their like training center in Raoul. I'm definitely saying that wrong, but it's like near Grenoble in France is really cool. And their like setting is probably some of the best overall, like or highest average like setting of any nation I've been to. And overall, like Europe, like the setters are just like so good. I feel like they just treat it like an art form, and there's a good amount of setters in the US that are like that as well. But overall, there's just like a much deeper like connection and like pride that comes with like setting and like actually learning and getting better and like testing new types of movement and stuff like that. And I think that's like because the gyms value that more. Like maybe in the US, it's a bit It's definitely like way more commercialized, and they don't care about like paying the setters enough to like actually have time to like set good boulders, or like it's just like a machine rather than creating really cool climbs. Yeah, so French team is cool. Like the Japanese team is really crazy just to watch and climb with as well. I mean, really, like all the teams, the Austrians have a lot of cool training zones. Like spend a lot of time in Innsbruck training at KI. Their ropes are best rope climbs like in the world, probably at KI. The boulders are a bit not as consistent, I would say. At least if you're not climbing on like the World Cup boulders that are set like specifically for the national team. Was in Belgium for a comp there. That was super cool. Very high level of setting as well. The Italian team is like they're all cool. I don't want to. And now I got to name all the countries so I don't leave anyone out.
Yeah, but, exactly.
The Swiss team, super fun. Got some friends there. The Brits haven't been to the UK yet, but fun to train with those boys. Yeah, everyone. Germany, Munich, got some fun climbs.
Hit pretty much most of them. All right.
Yeah.
Actually, you didn't mention Slovenia.
Brazil. Oh yeah, Slovenia is super cool. That was like one of my most favorite comps was actually the one in Ljubljana, right? Like in the center of town, like they built this huge wall. It felt like it was like the most hype comp I've been to, where it started at like 10, the finals did. They had like a DJ playing like crazy loud like house tech music, and then like big steam cannons that like went off as you like ran out of ISO, and the like mascot of the city was like this huge dinosaur. So like at sports games, you know how they have like the mascot person running around? That guy was like on the pads just like giving you high fives, and yeah, it was a pretty hyped crowd. Yeah. Sorry if I left your country off the list. Chile,
it's
Brazil.
Hard to name all of the countries. Yeah. Understandable.
Canada.
I can edit in you saying all of them, maybe.
Perfect.
Okay, quick. We'll just try to do one more. Trying to find a good one. How's the dynamic in the U.S. national team between the guys? Is it more competitive or supportive?
That's a very good question. I mean, overall, yeah, it's very supportive. Like, it's a super fun crew of people to like travel and climb and train with. I think it's maybe more like individualized than it could be. I mean, that's like, I'm sure that's true at like high level sports, like kind of anywhere, but I think there's a lot to learn from one another. And I don't feel like that's always maximized in terms of like learning what, like if you make a mistake and it like you figured out a really good solution to it, like I want to know about that. And like, I think we could have more conversations around that. And that's something I've like tried just to like ask people about and like start those conversations. But overall, yeah, it's a super good crew of people, and yeah, very fun to go travel to these new places and go explore these zones with everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you don't live in Utah, so you're not always training with them. Do you feel like that makes it kind of hard?
I did live there for like 3 years, or like 2 years, I guess. I mean, there's not of the national team, I guess, like we didn't train together as much as I thought everyone would in Utah. And that kind of is the same thing I was just talking about, where like I feel like in San Diego I learned more because it's like a more collaborative environment like that. But yeah, that's like a very big generalization, but I think it's really fun to go back and like have those like super rich training environments in Salt Lake, where you have like, when you can organize everyone, it's like the best. But because there's like so many gyms and so many people doing like so many things, it's sometimes hard to like actually capitalize on like all of that energy and all of that like talent in that one zone. Whereas like the Japanese or like French teams are like required by like their
really?
federations to like live in the same zone, and they're paid, some of them,
I
to
didn't
like
know about that.
climb and like be a part of like the national team. So they like move to a training center. There's like two main training centers, one that I mentioned like near Grenoble and one in Font, and then everyone like trains there, and like you're just constantly in this like super rich learning environment with like, yeah, all your teammates.
Yeah, I didn't know they did that. Well, I guess I thought in Japan they're also kind of pretty like individualized and spread out.
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong about Japan, but I thought they definitely like train as a crew more. I mean, and to be fair, like the US has gotten like way better with that, and like having the training center in Salt Lake is like a massive step because there is just like a central zone for everyone to climb at. But I mean, just having the US be so big, it's like it's hard to have everyone be in the same place. And but it's been really cool to have like national team training camps at the TC and like have more coaches and more setting and all of that, all those resources.
Cool. That's probably all the questions we should go through for today. Thanks for joining me. Is there anything you want to shout out or like last words or let people know where they can find you?
Yeah, I guess my Instagram and YouTube are just Ross Fulkerson. I always love hearing from people. Like if you've got suggestions for videos or other things that you've like seeing, I'm always psyched to hear about that. And I whenever anyone like comes up in the gym or whatever, I always try and ask like, what would you want to see more of like in the YouTube videos, or like what's the most like helpful piece in terms of like coaching or stuff like that. So it's always just fun to hear from fans in that regard. Don't be afraid to come up and say hi, unless I'm super focused. Unless I'm doing my double inhale breath work. No, I'm joking. But overall, I think just building that awareness on the wall is huge. Like everything, all the coaching little tips and things we talked about today, like you have to be like intentional with that and like actually want to like get better at something. So if you're wanting like have a goal, have something you want to improve at, and then just be aware of like how you're climbing, and then when you hear a tip or like someone tells you like how to actually climb better, like implement some certain thing, like you have the awareness to actually do that well. I would encourage everyone just to take that kind of like learning approach to climbing if they find it fun. Like you don't have to like always be like training and getting better, but it's a cool way to like keep things really engaging, and you'd be surprised like how quickly you can progress if you actually just make those goals and like try to get better.
Awesome tips and great advice to end on. Thank you again. Good luck in your future World Cups this year. We'll be rooting for you, and it was amazing to talk to you.
Likewise, I really enjoyed being on, and hopefully we do a second one later down the line or something.
Gosh, yeah, I'm sure you have a lot more to say. I have a lot more to ask that I didn't even get through.
Yeah, maybe leave a comment on this podcast or one of my YouTube videos for other questions you'd want answered in a second episode.
Yeah, definitely.
And for like all my coaching stuff, either on Mind to Motion or sometime in the relatively near future, I'm going to try and release my own like online coaching modules. So
sick.
Stay tuned for that.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and I'll link all of it in the description description boxes, and etc. Cool, awesome.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Awesome. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much for making it to the end of the podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Otherwise, you are a super fake climber. If you're listening on a podcasting platform, I'd appreciate if you rate it 5 stars, and you can continue the discussion on the free competition climbing Discord linked in the description. Thanks again for listening.